Welcome back, folks. This is Chance here with Apocalypsis Historia, here with Brady. He and I are going to be coming at you today talking about a specific essay by a professor named Patrick Buckridge. And this essay is going to talk about a few concepts like serial composition and maybe evidence that isn't quite strong enough for authorship maybe can be reversed and show that it's against the authorship. Stay tuned. We're going to dive into this. Going to talk about Venus and Adonis and maybe some Twelfth Night and maybe some other stuff. But as you will see, going to be talking about figures like Chris Hatton, Edward Dyer, Edward DeVere, Philip Sidney, Queen Elizabeth, and more. So stay tuned.
Alright everyone, welcome back to another episode of Apocalypsis Historia. Back as usual, Chance and Brady here with another Shakespeare authorship series. And like we mentioned in the intro, that we're going to be going over a essay by Patrick Buckridge, and yeah, he is actually a literature professor, right? As opposed to how you were kind of contrasting maybe his credentials with some other people that are also in the authorship scene, right?
So there's several big names that are professors, and some of them are even professors of literature. But Patrick Buckridge is like specifically a professor of literature that has expertise in the Elizabethan field and gets to teach classes in the Elizabethan field, whereas maybe some other literature professors aren't necessarily in the Elizabethan field, and they've gotten into it through the Shakespeare authorship question. And so, yeah, Patrick Buckridge is a professor of English at Griffith University in Australia. We're going to be reading an essay from the Elizabethan Review, and this is his third appearance in it. You want to pop it on?
He's like an actual, legit professor, not some crackpot internet, crazy theorist guy. But yeah, he is
like us.
He is, we would probably classify him as very agnostic, maybe about answering the question. But he's still like, I don't believe he doesn't believe in Shakespeare.
Yeah, or like I don't even know if he does or doesn't. He's just open to the question. He's just open to the idea that this hasn't been totally answered, and finds that doing some of this digging can be very valuable and has a purpose to it. And so
do you think he's going to be one of our other Mount Rushmore of Apocalypsis Shakespeare guys? He's
got several other essays that I've liked,
and then maybe Buckridge is starting to kind of make, because he does a great job, as you'll see, as exactly what you're saying, kind of backtracing, like, okay, here's like kind of our given narrative, and he'll give some great instances of like, here's how people would deduce the narrative that we're supposedly given, but and then starts to break down like, okay, here's some of the questions we should start asking about why, if this is what it is, how do these people actually connect, or if there is other metaphors. So all great stuff to get into today. So I think with no further ado, let's get right into it, huh?
Okay, you want to pop it on for our viewers here? All right, here we go, folks. As you see, Christopher Hatton, Edward Dyer, and the First Adonis by Patrick Buckridge. Let's see. Sir Christopher Hatton, Captain of the Queen's Guard, Vice Chamberlain, Knight of the Garter, Privy Councillor, and Lord Chancellor of England, was, together with Burleigh, Leicester, and Walsingham. Brady and I have mentioned those three several times. They're almost like a triumvirate of power, all kind of through the Queen and through the government. Buckridge here is lumping Hatton in with them, so like these are the four most powerful guys in England, as it says. One of the foremost influential statesmen of Elizabeth's reign. Leicester aside, he was also the Queen's most loyal and long-term personal favorite, and probably her lover. But that said, like, Hatton's not as popular of a name as those other three, and he's not that those three are super popular names or household names, but they are well known in history. Christopher Hatton's a little less known, a little less studied, and so he says, until 1944 there was no modern full-length biography of him. There's been none since. The reason for this has been suggested that maybe he's been traditionally thought of as a lightweight and a dandy. And so, he's not this cool, powerful, like, Leicester figure or this, like, conniving genius, Walsingham figure.
Francis Bacon-y even.
Yeah, like...
He's just some, or some, like, arm candy
yeah.
or something.
Yeah, he's the queen. Yeah, he's just the queen's, like, boy toy.
Yeah.
So let's see. But how much of a lightweight he is, like, really up for debate, but he is kind of a dandy. So he says, Hatton then was no political lightweight, but he was probably a bit of a dandy. The legend, and there's no reason to doubt its essential truth, is that Hatton danced his way into the Queen's heart in January of 1562. The occasion was a mass presented at court by the gentlemen of Inner Temple, of whom the 21-year-old Hatton was one, and Elizabeth was taken with his handsome face and graceful figure that she made him one of her own gentlemen pensioners and a close favorite. And so if we go farther along, it says he died in 1591 at the age of 51, apparently of acute cystitis, and his death was the occasion for an unusually large number of eulogies over the next few years, including one by Robert Greene called A Maiden's Dream upon the Death of My Late Lord Chancellor. Most of these stressed his gentle and courteous manners, his amiability, integrity, and compassion. Some look back to his former beauty of face and figure, and to his youthful prowess in the hunt and tilt yard, in both of which he excelled as much as he did on the dance floor. His heraldic animal was the hen. Drake named his flagship the Golden Hen in honor of it, and surmounted the sumptuous monument erected for him in the old St. Paul's, which was by Sir William Dugdale. So yeah, Hatton,
pretty cool dandy to get Francis Drake and name his ship after him.
Exactly, like the first English ship to go around the world is named after this guy, and we're like, nah, he's kind of a Nancy boy.
Just right off the back, they're connecting a bunch of big people here, and I'm not sure if they mentioned John Dee at all in this essay. I only got through like 3/4 of it, but I did find another essay where John Dee and Hatton also have a bit of a relationship, where I think Dee in some kind of one of his treaties or things, I think it's in memorials, I think he had a little verse that he dedicates to Hatton as well. So yeah, Hatton, definitely connected dude. As we sort of started to find that Edward Dyer is also sort of one of these like background dudes you just find his fingers and everything,
Yeah, absolutely. And like at some point, as we'll see here, they're all coming out of this Leicester circle. Dee, Dyer, Hatton, Philip Sidney, they're all kind of arms and mouthpieces of Leicester in the 60s and 70s. How much that's true into the 80s and into the 90s when some of these folks are dead, who's to say? Alright. Let me see. Hatton's literary and dramatic interests, both before and after he came to the court, were not insignificant. He played a part in Gorboduc, and he even did a bit of writing himself. The Tragedy of Tancred and Gismund was the joint effort of 5 authors. So there you go, collaboration, folks. Collaboration already happening back in the 1560s. One for each act. The 4th act signed Christopher Hatton. So there we go.
Just an awesome thing. Remember, Gorboduc is the only play that Philip Sidney praises in defense of Posey. Yeah,
and as one of our commenters, Pat Tilton, has been pointing out, that that's also mentioned in George Puttenham's The Art of English Poetry, which is almost like maybe a response to Philip Sidney's essay.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, that's right.
And so like it may not just be Philip Sidney that thought super highly of Gorboduc and Thomas Sackville, aka Lord Buckhurst. So let me see. Further literary endeavors, if there were any, are less certain. He may have contributed a group of maybe up to 20 poems and translations to the anthology of 1573 called A Hundredth Sundry Flowers, which is usually attributed to George Gascon, but surely it's not all George Gascon. And if you're someone that's in the Shakespeare authorship question, you should probably question if George Gascon really wrote any of that and who George Gascon really is. because he wrote these 2 great pieces and then doesn't write anything worth of value after that. And so it's like he seems like maybe one of the first frontmen. But I've read several essays that have suggested, 100 Sundry Flowers has Dyer all over it, that it probably has Sackville, who's writing Gorboduc, all over it. And so it's probably the same 5+ guys that are writing.
Probably got some Dyer in there.
Tancred and Gismund. Yeah, for sure, Dyer, yeah. And so this is like almost maybe the dawn of the Shakespeare project, that you have this group of courtly writers trying to create literature, and specifically drama, theater, and poetry, to take English language, English culture, English society to a heightened level of, status, luxury, civilization, if you will.
Yeah.
And like from this, maybe it's just a little side hobby thing that these people do, but it gets real serious at some point, and it's because of a next generation. So these are maybe some of the oldest around, but a next generation, like, Oxford Sidney into Bacon and Mary Sidney, and then into another generation like maybe Manners, Rosley, into another generation like the Herberts and onwards, that like, it's getting heightened and done more and more and taken more and more seriously as it goes on and incorporates more and more folks. Maybe something like that.
As we've like continually argued here on this whole series, right? That this is very much a top-down project. Effort and far-reaching implications, and we've
absolutely state propaganda, if you want to call it that.
A social cohesion project, right?
Yeah.
Or something.
Let me see. These poems are linked to Hatton by a particular Latin motto, or poesy: Si fortunatus infelix, if fortunate, unhappy, which is clearly stated by Gabriel Harvey in his Marginalia to be lately the poesy of Sir Christopher Hatton. His actual authorship of these poems must, in my view, remain a distinct possibility, despite Prouty's insistence that the whole volume be attributed to George Gascon, which is sort of the orthodox view, though I don't think that's totally consensus. As was done by the publisher 3 years, despite the efforts of B.M. Warren and others to assign all or most of the volume to Edward DeVere. So Oxfordians want to claim this one as well, maybe not all Oxfordians, but as Buckridge is saying here, Hatton probably had a hand in some of these, and as we showed with Tancred and Gismund, a collaborative effort is not out of the norm. So, the Hatton poesy, Fortunatus and Felix, is also the key to the Dancing Chancellor's one reputed appearance in the Shakespeare canon. So even Stratfordians, and especially Oxfordians, will say that the character of Malvolio from... Let me see if you get Twelfth Night up here. Brady's totally a tragedies guy. Like, almost no comedies. Yeah, which is totally fine.
And, I went to Half Price Books the other day, and, like, I saw a bunch of them, and because last time I went, they didn't have the Signet classes, and the last time I went there, they did have a bunch, and I was like, I was grabbing a bunch, but I was like, I don't remember which ones I have and which ones I don't, and I pulled up an episode on YouTube, and I was trying to, like, zoom into the background of one of our podcasts to see, like, what books I had, and I was like, I couldn't tell which ones, and so, I basically don't have as many of the comedies or the romances or
you do get Merry Wives, so that's good.
Yeah.
But Twelfth Night has a character who's maybe sort of the crux of the play in a weird way, even though he's not totally a main character. Malvolio. He's like the butler or the servant or the head sort of household secretary of Countess Olivia. And Malvolio is this real curmudgeonly, foppy dandy, but also stern and like sort of a micromanager. But as I was explaining to you the other day, that he's kind of a mix between Professor Snape and Percy Weasley. Like he's got this real type A buzzy bee,
kind of snitch kind of person.
But also just unpleasant and So, who is Malvolio? And a lot of people have just suggested, oh, that's Christopher Hatton. And it's like, why? Why? Like, everything from the eulogy said he was a real nice guy. He was wonderful, and he used to be really pretty looking.
Yeah, some of the biggest badasses, like, Francis Drake naming whole ships after him or whatever, apparently.
What's the deal here? And so, who is Malvolio? So, let's see. The Hatton posy, Fortunatus and Felix, is also the key to the Dancing Chancellor's one reputed appearance in the Shakespeare canon, when Malvolio in Twelfth Night reads the forged letter, ostensibly from Olivia. The signature is given as the Fortunate Unhappy. And so, in the play, there's some other characters that live as either servants or friends or family of Olivia, and they live on the grounds or they visit on the grounds. And everybody hates Malvolio, and so they're trying to troll him by writing him fake love letters from Olivia. And so they're trying to get Malvolio to believe that, his boss has fallen in love with him. And of course, Malvolio's so like into himself that he'll totally believe that. And which is interesting because it almost has this like meta authorship question in it, that like they tell who did and didn't write it by the handwriting, and they're trying to fake somebody's handwriting and like fake somebody's style, like, oh yes, that's totally how she would sound,
right?
And
right. They do talk about like
and they even talk about talk about like, no, that's what Malvolio would want to hear, and that's what the audience wants to hear, and like it's this perfect amalgamation of like copying someone's style and trying to trick an audience, and it's like, well, that's interesting. That's I don't know why.
A lot to read in there.
Yeah, I don't know why, if it's just some regular guy like Shakespeare, why he'd be thinking about that kind of stuff. But if you're totally, a concealed aristocratic poet, or just someone using a pen name and, trying to hide your privacy for whatever reason, those kinds of things are going to be rolling through your head, And so it's totally in there. But at any rate, in that, the person signing as Olivia, which it's not Olivia, it's, I forget her name, but it's Toby Belch, Andrew Aguecheek, and the head maid servant, and she's the one writing it, and she signs it as the Fortunate Unhappy, and so Oxfordians are like, boom, Fortunate Unhappy, that's a jab at Christopher Hatton. He's the one that said Fortunate Unhappy. Boom, there you go. But it's reinforced by Sir Toby Belch calls Malvolio a sheep biter, and we know that sheep and mutton were Elizabeth's favorite nickname for Hatton. So boom, another jab at Hatton. Okay, the known enmity between Oxford and Hatton is evidenced in Hatton's letter to the Queen, of which more later. The image of Hatton in some circles is a fop and a dandy. His image as a social upstart among aristocratic courtiers is illustrated by Naughton's description of his career as that of a mere vegetable of the court that sprang up at night and sank again at his noon. The supposed presumptuousness and suspected impropriety of his relationship with the Queen is evidenced by Mary Stuart's letter to Elizabeth, intercepted by Burleigh, and by his own highly charged letters to her in the early 1570s. And the external evidence of Francis Peck in the 18th century, that he had seen a manuscript of A Pleasant Conceit of DeVere, Earl of Oxford, discontented at the rising of a mean gentleman in English court, circa 1580. And so, we have a lot of evidence that shows that maybe people didn't like Hatton rising up so quickly, especially because it's probably purely because of the Queen's favor. It's not like he's doing some super climbing. It's like, oh no, the Queen's almost just gifting him stuff because she's in love with him.
Accusation.
Yeah, like he's gold digging almost. And so let's see what Buckridge has to say about that, because maybe this is a compelling argument. Maybe you've already seen the holes through it. I don't know. Let's see. This is an imposing list of reasons, but it's easy to overlook the lack of a single clincher among them. So, I've seen another good essay that was talking about flaws in a lot of authorship question arguments, and maybe we'll pull this up one day, I forget who wrote it, but it was saying that you can stack up all these little things, but that won't necessarily amount to a big thing, because a dozen weak arguments don't amount to one strong argument. That's just a bunch of weak arguments that they're all weak because maybe there's nothing there.
It's kind of back to our group theory wins video.
Yeah. And so, let's see. Peck's lost
maybe I'm thinking it's the future of Shakespeare authorship is what I'm thinking of about.
The future of Shakespeare. Yes, where we do the David Chandler essay. Peck's lost manuscript, if it was indeed a court interlude of some kind, may well have had nothing to do with the Twelfth Night. Indeed, if Peck's mean gentleman resembled Malvolio, one might have expected Peck, writing in the 18th century, to mention the resemblance. Secondly, the hoaxing letter in the Twelfth Night is not written by Malvolio, but to him. And so this is the problem, is that if you want to link Hatton's The Fortunate Unhappy with Malvolio, that doesn't work, because that letter's not written by Malvolio and being signed by him as The Fortunate Unhappy. It's being written to him. So Hatton, if anything, is the one faking the letter. If you want to make that specific Hatton, identification. So that's kind of weird. Very similarly, the sheep-biter epithet does not really equate easily with sheep. So, maybe a sheep that bites, or a sheep that bites another sheep, maybe. But, why would you call somebody who's sheep a sheep biter? What is?
So break it down, because they were in the play. Someone calls Malvolio the sheep biter.
So there's this character Toby Belch, who's one of the ones that's helping fake this letter. Mm-hmm. One point he calls Malvolio a sheep biter.
Right.
And
and the Oxfordians are saying, Malvolio is Hatton, a.k.a. the sheep.
The sheep.
Per the nickname that Elizabeth gave him. And yet it doesn't make sense to call the sheep also a sheep biter, literally the one who doesn't like the sheep. Or is that, that he's...
What is a sheep biter? Well, it's
a dog that bites or worries sheep.
Yeah, it's a sheepdog or a wolf or a coyote.
And the next line. And with several secondary meanings, one of which is malicious or censorious fellow.
Interesting, which backs up the name Malvolio, right? And censorious, specifically, someone who comes and tells you what you can or can't say, or what you should or shouldn't think, and that their opinion's better than everybody else's. And
you're an upstart fellow here,
yeah,
right?
Kind of bombastic, yeah. So let me see. If the sheep element in the epithet does or did at some stage in the play's evolution contain a cryptic allusion to Hatton, it would more logically been a reference to somebody who was an enemy or a nuisance to Hatton. So if Hatton's the sheep, who is the sheep biter? Who was the person that was constantly nagging Hatton? That's probably a better question, right? So if for the sake of argument, the name of Edward DeVere were proposed in the place of Christopher Hatton as the original for Malvolio. Alright, don't turn us off here, don't unsubscribe, but let's consider the idea that DeVere is maybe Malvolio. Let's see if this can make any sense. It would at least highlight the reversibility of several of the Oxfordian arguments, in this case about Malvolio, but Brady and I have been trying to not actively do that, but we have come across evidence that has been, sort of conventionally, in the last few decades at least, or maybe last 100 years, by Oxfordians as evidence for Oxford. It's clearly a reference to or about Oxford, so this must be Oxford doing the writing. But as me and Brady have been pointing out, a lot of that may be Sidney or Dyer. Sidney or Dyer totally have a relationship with Oxford, and they have rivalry or feud or hatred even, or maybe they have sort of poetic rivalry or co-influence,
right.
And so maybe this is a perfect example of that exact thing. It would at least highlight the reversibility of several of the Oxfordian arguments about Malvolio, the known enmity between the two men, their suspected sexual intentions towards the Queen, and the image of the affected fop. All of these can support an Oxford allusion as strongly as a Hatton one. So that's interesting. All the points that are being made against Hatton can technically be made against Oxford. nobody would think to do that because the only ones thinking of spotting Hatton seemed. The only ones thinking of spotting Hatton are Oxfordians themselves, and so if they're thinking of spotting Hatton, like they're not thinking
and they've got their target already drawn. They already know. It's like they've done the good work of like, hey, Hatton.
That's an Oxford reference.
Yeah, they can clearly tell, but they've got it accidentally backwards or whatever that they think that Oxford is always going to be the one that's the underdog, or Oxford's always going to be the one that's
the genius behind the thought.
But once you just kind of just read a little harder. I hate to kind of insinuate that, but if you just kind of read the text a little harder, a little more deeper, and you kind of be like, no.
Yeah, just be open to other possibilities. Like try and literally be as extensive as possible with your possibilities to try and eliminate every possibility that you can. Like try and go through every single thing if you can. Otherwise, you might have some confirmation bias going on.
Right, exactly, because it's.
So let me keep going here. All of these can support an Oxford illusion as strongly as a Hatton one. Gabriel Harvey's Mirror of Tuscanism provides a well-known description of Oxford's affected foppery on his return from Italy in 1575, and this description provides us at least as plausible an external referent for Malvolio's sartorial aberration as anything in Hatton's reputation. His cringing side neck, eyes glancing, fist namely sparking with forefinger kiss and brave embrace to the footward, large-bellied codspeed doublet, uncodspeed half-hose, straight to the dock like a shirt, and close to the breech like a diveling, a little apish flat, crouched fast to the pate like an oyster, French cameric ruffs deep with a whiteness starched to the purpose, delicate in speech, quaint in array, conceited in all points, in courtly guiles a passing singular odd man, for gallants a brave mirror, a primrose of honor. There are, of course, many ways in which Malvolio is patently not Oxford. Malvolio is a servant and a stickler for moral proprieties. Oxford wasn't those. But no more was Hatton. And if the meaning of Malvolio's name, I wish thee ill, were to be applied to a real individual at Elizabeth's court, there were undoubtedly many there who had thought, maybe rightly or wrongly, that it fit the haughty Oxford better than the courteous Hatton. So, that's definitely true. Go ask maybe the Howard brothers. But whatever person or persons may have been glanced at and recognized in some version of Twelfth Night performed at court in the late 1570s, it is a safe bet that these allusions and the topics that gave them their point, most obviously at that time the topic of the French marriage, so this is maybe the topic that Sydney and Oxford were supposedly set to duel on, which got maybe one or both of them banished from court. That was the thing that Philip Sidney, maybe not directly for the duel, but Philip Sidney kept pushing the point to the Queen, and she didn't like the idea that he was against the marriage, and that if he was going to duel Oxford, that would be him fighting someone above his status, and that he needed to defer to Oxford. And he refused, so he got banished. But then Oxford got banished pretty soon after for knocking up. He got one of the ladies in waiting pregnant. What was her name? Anne Vavasor, and she had a son named Sir Edward Vere, who, since he was illegitimate, couldn't become the heir, and so his later son with his second wife, and I guess his third baby's mama.
Subscribe for Renaissance Baby Mom.
That's who became his heir, Sir Henry DeVere. But that was much later. Let me see. So, whatever person or persons may have been glanced at and recognized in some version of the Twelfth Night performed at court in the late 1570s, it is a safe bet that these allusions and topics gave them their point. Most obviously at that time, the topic of French marriage would have been long forgotten by the Middle Temple audience on the occasion of the first recorded performance of Twelfth Night in 1602. For that performance, different topical themes and different personal allusions would very likely have been in play. So, the process by which such changes come about has been called serial composition, which refers to the writing over a period of time of a series of versions of a play for a succession of different audiences and occasions. And this need not be only with a play. This can be with a novel, a poem, a script, an essay. Like, if you have several people working over something, or even one person just working over something over long periods of time and putting several versions through, that's all serial composition. And that may be why it's so hard to spot style in some of these poems and plays, is that they may be being serially composed. And so I've been having a hard time with the sonnets, because I think maybe there's some serial composition happening with the sonnets, because for all intents and purposes, almost all the sonnets of Elizabethan England are coming out in like a 4 or 5 year period, and then Shakespeare sonnets are like 10, 15 years later, and it's like, why that? Well, they probably were being written around that same time, but they're being reworked over again, and maybe even reworked over again when they're going to get published. And maybe they were already written long before that 1590s publishing flurry, because it seems like all those kind of burst on the scene like immediately. Those would have maybe even had to have been written and been around for a while, and that's somewhat well attested, between Meares attesting Shakespeare having his sonnets amongst friends in the 1598, and then people have also said that, yeah, Sidney had his sonnets going around in manuscript in the 80s. So that's like, it's not out of question that serial composition is definitely happening, and we saw that in the Henslow Diary, right?
I'd say that definitely ties in with that whole, like, that's why you see literally the same play names that are just, taken before, and they just haven't had that treatment yet.
And if I can only change the Stratfordian mind on one thing, like, if Stratfordians can never get past Shakespeare authorship question, at least one thing: acknowledge the idea or the possibility that Troilus and Cressida is Decker and Chettle, and then being done over again by Shakespeare. If that's like, because right now the orthodox, theory is that no, it's just a rival play that's not really that influenced by it, not at all related, separate play. And it's like, no way, like no way that Troilus and Cressida. Man, I keep turning. Oh no, you do have Troilus.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, no way you don't have Troilus. We've talked about this. No way Troilus and Cressida is not the Decker and Chettle play that is in the Henslow Diary. If we want to call it Shakespeare as well, maybe it's been touched up or reworked a little bit, but it could be done as it was done in the Henslow Diary.
Too much of Decker's hand and whatnot is
Which,
still in there.
Remember, like, this is the exact play that is in the first folio, but not in the first folio.
Yeah, it's hidden.
Yeah, it's hidden. It's like, it's almost like they're ashamed of it or something.
Yeah, you go try to like look it up in the index, because I remember when you first got the folio copy.
Yeah,
I remember just like looking through it, and it's like, it's not in here.
Yeah,
it's like
I was so disappointed.
Yeah, and then but I don't remember how we found it, if we just started to thumb through that or whatnot. But yeah, it's like, oh, here it is. But yeah, it's not listed for whatever reason.
Yeah, like what's going on here? So
also, spoiler, foreshadow. Troilus and Cressida, also written by Chaucer, that we've Chaucer also wrote.
So Chaucer has an epic poem.
Troilus and Cressida, that is also once again referenced by Philip Sidney in the Defense of Poesy.
Yeah.
Are y'all? Is there a current underlying or a pattern here that we're seeing?
Yeah,
yet?
and Chaucer's super influential, and plenty of people say that, but like, it seems that Philip Sidney, more than anybody, heeds the call of Chaucer to become sort of a poet laureate, even if only for personal reasons, to become this almost bardic character. And maybe that's created after his death, but maybe he's already inhabiting that to have created that writing, unless people want to say that Philip Sidney didn't write Philip Sidney, which, fine, I'm open to it if you can make that argument. I've seen among Baconian circles there's a writer named A. Phoenix. I think that's a pen name, but A. Phoenix is a believer that Francis Bacon is the real writer behind all of Philip Sidney and all of Samuel Daniel, with the help of Mary Sidney as well. Which, maybe I'm not a fan of that theory, but it does point to a interesting problem that look, Samuel Daniel's way too close to Shakespeare. There's way too much Samuel Daniel popping up in the mid-90s and in Shakespeare when it's supposed to be unpublished. There's no real reason because Daniel's not a playwright. Why would Daniel the poet be hanging out with Shakespeare the playwright? That doesn't really make much sense. But then again, Shakespeare was supposed to be just a poet, maybe even, because we only have his name on Venus and Adonis. We don't have his name on any plays till 1598 or later, which, when we do get his name on a play, it's Richard II, and that's the one that's got the most Daniel in it. And so, it's just what is going on with Samuel Daniel and Shakespeare, and that's something that made me and Brady say, okay, let's throw this Philip Sidney hat in the ring. But A. Phoenix will go one step further and say, that's not Philip Sidney, that's Bacon. But at some point, as me and Brady have shown, that you can't have the egg create the chicken, and then that chicken lay that egg that created that same chicken, like that that movie Looper with Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt or something. Like, that's almost what he's trying to do with Francis Bacon, because where is that influence coming from if not Philip Sidney itself, right? So if you're trying to write Philip Sidney out of it, then who is Bacon getting this from?
Besides, don't you, for a phoenix, has to sort of die to come back, in some degree, and so,
Yeah, which Baconians like saying Phoenix is only a reference to either Francis or Anthony Bacon, who both faked their deaths and came back, according to Baconians, but, hey, we can do that, too, with our guy, you know?
For real. Yeah, it's just like, but with our guy, I don't have my copies just sitting over here, but it's like, it's the only place where you could read an essay from that time period, and he'll be like, oh, we should all be, striving to recreating Chaucer's Troilus and Cressida, and our comedy should be depicting a comedy or the common errors of life, and and don't forget bards, and it's like all the red flags are just like in this one essay. It's so awesome, so I can't wait to do that episode. But
we will have a video on that essay soon.
But yeah, as far as this relates back to the Buckridge essay, once again, it's yes, this constant striving or trying to sift out the real metaphors in all these different plays, and properly attributing, like, yes, you did find the metaphor that there is a sheep patent reference here.
Yeah.
But you just
have we interpreted it correctly? Have we gone through all the possible interpretations and weighed them against each other?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's be a little scientific about it.
And that's why I felt bad for saying, like, oh, you got to read it a little deeper, because it does kind of saying that I feel like the text is not quite trying to trip you up. We're trying to untrip ourselves from a sort of Oxfordian perspective and be like, oh, no, wait, like, thanks for giving me the reference, but if you just read the sentence like this, how it actually reads,
and maybe I won't say deeper, because that has almost this,
go fun deeper.
It's got this weird, I'm a man. So I'll say more thoroughly.
Oh, you silly American.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a sec.
No, it's not one of these, sort of phallus measuring things.
Yeah.
Like, I can read deeper than you. Like, no, no, I mean more thoroughly. Okay. Like, let's just make sure that we're being logical about it. Let's think of all possibilities. Let's weigh those possibilities against each other. And sometimes it's hard to figure out those possibilities if we don't have our minds open or aren't informed with other background knowledge. So go get as much background knowledge from as many circles as you can to try and, have a wider perspective to spot anything. I've had this essay at my house for like 10 years, and that's about how long I've been in the Shakespeare authorship question, and I thought this essay was useless because it's not talking about Oxford, it's talking against Oxford. Let me throw it away. But in these last 2 years, since I've eschewed Oxford as a total solo candidate, and I've looked into people like Sidney and Dyer, this essay makes a lot of sense. It's like, oh my God, it makes a lot of sense. And that's not to say that, once again, that we think Oxford's out of it. If somebody's writing against Oxford, surely Oxford will be writing back against them, and this may start to explain things like the pamphlet wars in the late 80s, early 90s, or the War of the Theaters in the late 90s, early 1600s. Maybe it's these circles kind of throwing their philosophical and personal jabs at each other through public, printing, distribution, theater, whatever ways they want. It's like a sort of cherry on top of this.
It'd be like today's like internet forums, and they've got their little like screen names, and they're like,
right.
Oh, I'm just a little anonymous person doing this, and they garner a bunch of like and they got their people obviously replying or whatnot.
Right, and if any of you folks were around for the 1990s and were privy to hip hop music in the 1990s, it was completely dominated by this whole West Coast versus East Coast thing. But at some point, if you looked into who owned the record labels by 1996 or later, they're all owned by the same people. In fact, right around when Tupac and Notorious B.I.G. are fighting each other and having their people shoot each other and dying or whatever, that's right when Sony buys out both companies that own the records, and it's all merged into one giant thing anyway. And so it's like, how much of this, and in their lyrics, it has their feud in their lyrics, and like, I'm gonna shoot you, and one of them has I'm not a rapper, thank you. I did go to school with one though. But yeah, there's a song title. It's called "Who Shot Ya," because I forget which one was which, but one of them got shot. The other one may have done the shooting, and the one that may have done the shooting made a song like "Who Shot Ya," and like how much of that just totally mirrors what is happening in the pamphlet wars and what has happened in the War of the Theaters about a decade later. And at some point, like, yeah, how much of that feud is actually even real, and how much of it's projected to sell the product that it is, to hype up the product.
Hey man, go out there, make a song, and throw a little quip about guy over here, stir the pot a little bit, and everyone's gonna, everyone likes picking sides, and let's be real here. Everyone likes voting or rooting at a sports event or whatever. So it's
I was talking
a primal thing.
I was talking with some of my students about a rapper that it's a very recent one, not very recent, but recent within the last 5-10 years. I don't even know the name, but they were someone that got real famous 5 years ago through really inflammatory, nonsensical rap music, but at some point has sort of started to fade. And so I was like, oh, is so and so still famous? And they were like, yeah, but he doesn't really make music anymore. He just gets onto social media and talks crap about somebody and like posts it until that person posts back, and like that's what he does. So it's like he almost streamlined the music out of it into it's only just the inflammatory stuff to drive up, and like he makes a living doing this. Like he has no expertise but like he just gets the clicks because there's conflict.
So I guess he's very good at public relations in some sense or whatever, right? And
I forget
curating that image.
If I remember the guy's name, I could pull it up, and you'd be like, "This guy's not good at anything." But
let's save our audience.
Yeah. But that said, like, there's clearly maybe some personal stuff happening here behind the scenes and philosophical stuff happening behind the scenes, but maybe there's also this narrative that's being driven to help sell the pamphlets, to help sell the plays.
You got to read the next thing. Oh, what's the next fiery thing you're going to say about him? Like, it's like
the original clickbait of reality TV.
Yeah, exactly.
So that said, let's hop back into Buckridge here. Yeah. He says, Leah S. Marcus, Stephen Erkowitz, and other orthodox Shakespeare scholars have applied the principle of serial composition to some of the Shakespearean bad quartos with interesting results. Indeed, the unintentionally heterodox implications of their work have yet to be exploited. So, they looked in the bad quartos, which are supposed to be piratical rip-offs of Hamlet, but they went in and said, like, look, maybe some of these things that we've been historically calling bad quartos are actually earlier versions or source plays. And they did it not just with, and maybe not these specific people, but other people have done it not just with the bad quartos of Hamlet, but they've done it with things like the True Tragedy of Richard III, or the contention of the houses between York and Lancaster. And we don't have a text for it, but like proposing it for King Lear, or Taming of a Shrew versus Taming of the Shrew. A lot of people in the Orthodox Shakespeare view, Stratfordian view, want to say Taming of a Shrew is just a bootleg. Somebody went to the theater and was like kind of writing it down as people said it, and they're missing lines, so they're just summarizing. And when they missed whole things, they had to go back and just make up a thing. But no.
Yeah, this guy is like, villain mustache. I've got a new play, Taming of Ashrew. Yeah, it's like, that's some real good bootlegging, I guess. Yeah, like, especially for, once again, there's only so many places you can put on the plays of this caliber and who owns these theaters and whatnots, and that's going to be a very small circle. So.
Yeah, where are you selling these bootleg plays? Yeah. Like, where is this happening?
Yeah, you got
yeah.
They got Chinese figure guys over there on the side of the road. Taming of Ashrew. I was
going to say, like DH Gate.
Hey, wait a second. This is just a Chinese ripoff.
Yeah, DH Gate bootleg DVD of Taming of Ashrew. Oh
my God.
So, alright, but like, if you're an Orthodox scholar and you come up with the idea that there are earlier versions of these plays, how do you explain some of these earlier versions and what the relationship is? And that hasn't been fully explored, although it's getting explored in real time, because this is not written like today. I want to say this is from like 2005. So those things are getting explored today, but and have been maybe for a little bit, but they're still not worked out by any means. In the present context, given the chronology of publication, it is clear that if Hatton, who died in 1591, is to be found anywhere in the Shakespeare canon, it can only be as a residual allusion from an earlier version or one of the other Shakespeare texts we now have. So Buckridge doesn't fully explicate this, but he's saying that, like, look, if a lot of these plays are being done by serial composition, it's possible that Hatton's in a lot of these plays, but he'd only be in the earlier version of a lot of these plays, and when they're getting reworked for anything after 1591, which is pretty much all of Shakespeare, that when they're getting reworked, they're not going to keep the Hatton references around, or they're going to get distorted.
Character elements or whatever, right? Yeah.
And they may be, in fact, co-opted for other people and for other purposes, as maybe he, in fact, argues in this essay. So let me continue. It can only be as a residual form from an earlier version of one or the other Shakespeare text we now have. If not in Twelfth Night, where else might he be found? Okay. Indeed. So already in Twelfth Night, we have this weird... Is it Oxford making fun of Hatton? Or perhaps it's someone making fun of Oxford on the behalf of Hatton, right? So maybe we can use that same thing with another Shakespearean text. Buckridge says, I want to argue this is Venus and Adonis. Serial composition, after all, can occur with poems as well as plays, and did occur with manuscript as well as printed publications. The notion that Shakespeare's first long poem might be a product of serial composition has been around in semi-orthodox circles since 1930, when it was argued at length by H.T.S. Forrest. What the heck? Totally independent of this Buckridge essay, I've been reading H.T.S. Forrest, and I've mentioned him in several of our videos dating. He's the guy that said the sonnets are written by 5 different people, all doing their competition.
Okay.
And so he's a Stratfordian, but...
I'm just thinking maybe I got this guy confused with Buckridge at the same time.
Yeah. And so H.T.S. Forrest, much older, he's back in the, sort of early... Oxfordian days in the 20s, 30s, 40s.
This goes back to our Sleuthing the Science video when you're talking about the competition, and to rope in DeVere with Sydney again. We do have an actual example of their back and forth, right?
Yeah.
The Kingdom Cottager grave.
Which, by the way, I don't know how soon, but expect a video on looking into the relationship of DeVere, Sidney, and the Stanleys, and Thomas Watson. Thomas Watson is a poet from the 80s, if you're not familiar with him. He's supposed to be one of the best Latin poets, as we saw in Mires, which he is. But he may also be sort of one of the originators or inventors of the sonnet, as well as Sidney, and he may even predate Sidney as far as being a sonneteer. But usually we regard him as Latin. Like, his best stuff's his Latin stuff. His English stuff is good, but like a lot of his stuff got turned into English by other guys at the time, like Abraham France. But Thomas Watson did a dedication to Oxford. He's supposed to be best buddies with Chris Marlowe. Shakespeare has been called the heir of Thomas Watson. And so it's like, there's so much going on with Thomas Watson in the 80s, and he's one of these guys that dies in 92. He dies like within days of Robert Greene, supposedly. And it's like, what is happening? And he's the one that in Sonnet 76, if you look at the acrostic that's made by it, it says WSWATSO. So it's William Shakespeare Watso. So what's happening here? And then people have pointed out that right under Watso is the letter A, but next to the letter A is the letter N, so you can say Watson, Watson. But what no one that I've seen on the internet has noticed is, forget about that stupid letter N to try and complete Watson. The freaking line in the sonnet says, almost doth tell my name, so it's not going to completely spell out Watson. It's going to almost completely spell out Watson. And where it should be an N that has that A, if you follow it 2 letters farther, it's SS. Ass. It's Watso ass. And as Brady and I have pointed out, there's this weird relationship between ox and ass in some of these Shakespeare plays.
And Cressida, this is where we get one of those exact references that we talk about in the Nash Decker Marlowe video.
As well as, Malcontent's not in that one? Okay. Well, as well as the Malcontent. And there may be other references in some of these other ones as well, but there's this weird relationship between Thomas Watson and Edward DeVere. And so I want to sort of pitch that maybe Thomas Watson, most of the work done by Thomas Watson is maybe by Edward DeVere. But
Subscribe, Oxfordians.
Yeah, I'm going to do that in another video because it ties back into what we've been saying about Sidney Dyer, and I want it to also, and I haven't fully figured it out, but I want it also to tie into the Stanleys, because the current conventional view is that Edmund Spenser, when he writes the name Amyntas in his Shepherd's Calendar or his some of his other works, when he's writing about Amyntas, that's a reference to Ferdinando Stanley. But then Thomas Watson uses the name Amyntas, and it seems to refer to something else, and so it's like, who's Amyntas? And people suggested maybe Thomas Watson's Amyntas, and so I want to fully figure that out. But you guys out there that have read Spenser, what are all these nicknames about? Please just tell me. If not, I'll figure it out. That said, let's dive back into Buckridge. Okay, so one intriguing possibility is Venus and Adonis. The notion that Shakespeare's long poem's been around since H.T.S. Forrest. Forrest wrote a book some years earlier on the sonnets, arguing that they were by 5 different authors. We've talked about this in our other videos, but it's a super compelling, intriguing idea, and his methodology is bizarre and frustrating, but like sometimes oddly compelling. It's not a very scientific methodology. It's super old school 19th century nonsense. It's super qualitative and like, this is good, so put it in this category. This is bad, put it in this category. But that said, like, he comes up with some stuff. It's like, it seems right actually. But I'm also a believer that the sonnets are not all, at least by the same hand, and even if they are by the same hand, that some serial compositions happening to suggest some are being written earlier and some are being written later for different reasons, under different moods or tones or whatever. So, his argument was simply that Shakespeare wrote and circulated in manuscript a complete version of Venus and Adonis that was less than 2/3 of its published length. About 127 stanzas versus the 199 stanzas. And that the 72 additional stanzas were interpolated by a different hand. But he purports to do this by identifying stanzas containing a device he calls duplication. By this he means multiple uses of the same conceit, where one instance of it, for example, can be shown to be illogically or incongruously placed in the poem. So, like, it's going to start talking about maybe a conceit about, and I'm just using this as an example, it's not in Venus and Adonis, but say it's going to start talking about swords or blades in the next stanza. It should go that you start talking about it and it develops into a stronger and stronger conceit. But if you've already read through it and you're going back to it later and you're adding in a new conceit or you're trying to strengthen that conceit, you might end up putting some of that stuff earlier than where it should be developed into. And so, like, you might end up talking wholly about a sword that's like, wait, what's the metaphor about? And then all of a sudden the sword metaphor develops and it's like, wait, what just happened here? And so that's what HTS Forrest is calling duplication. And Buckridge is like, yeah, I mean, that totally does happen and stuff. That happens all the time. If you guys have ever done any creative writing that's any sort of long amount of length and you're trying to do by memory and you're going back into it, you're like, oh yeah, this is the part of the chapter where so-and-so needs to happen, and you're like trying to find your place, and okay, I'm going to start writing about here and add in this paragraph. You might accidentally give some information that wasn't supposed to be given until a few paragraphs or pages later. Yeah, sorry guys. I need to get one of those like selfie sticks, but have it as a microphone, so I can do this. Okay. Yeah, my bad, guys. I'm gonna try and moderate my volume here. So that said, maybe some of this duplication's happening in this poem.
And I don't know if there's anything to this, but I do like how it's 127. You get like a little 9 here, and then 199 total stanzas, and then eventually adding another 9 here. So I don't know if there's anything to that.
There's
but
a lot.
I just see a little numbers here.
I'm sure there's a lot to it. You crypto guys, go crack that code. Let me see. So, this version of duplication in particular, Forrest finds several instances of it, does suggest a piecemeal padding out of a completed poem. There is, however, no equivalent cogency in Forrest's insistence that the revisions were carried out by a different hand. So, as much as, the argument for this poem being done with serial composition, that's fine, but is there actual evidence for it being done by more than one hand? That's up for grabs. And so Alden Brooks, who was the guy that said Edward Dyer was Shakespeare, that did the Dyer's Hand book, he asserts that the verses that Forrest designates as interpolations, though harmful to sequence and unity, are in themselves of the same excellence as the rest. I am less certain than Brooks is, but I admit that a case of difference in literary quality, even if clearly demonstrable, is not proof of dual authorship. So a lot of people, especially Forrest, and I totally empathize with them, that when you see something that's really good and something that's really bad, you don't want to say it's by the same person, right? And so that's what that's what Forrest is saying. But then Brooks is like, no, that's just because you're missing the point, and that doesn't fit with the unity of the poem, but they're still really good lines. And then Buckridge is like, well, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but neither way, it doesn't matter if they're good or not. That doesn't disclaim the authorship. It's not really how you want to do it. So in Brooks's view, a variant of Forrest is that Venus and Adonis was revised at least once by the original author, who he believes was Edward Dyer, rather than by a second hand. An assumption of the serial composition model, whether it involves one or two more authors, is that successive revisions are carried out for mainly external reasons having to do with changing economic motives and opportunities on the part of those involved, or changing sets of contemporary extra-textual reference. So there's reasons that these are being remade, and so those reasons for it being remade and reworked and retouched or brought back up is like, it will be apparent in the poem. It should be. In the case of Venus and Adonis, both factors may come into play, and although the economic factors can only be effectively considered in relation to a particular assumed author, some progress is possible on the extra-textual reference while suspending judgment for the moment to specific candidates. Orthodox commentators are generally reluctant to endorse contemporary allusions in Shakespeare's poems or plays. Yeah, we all know that. Yeah, they avoid it like the plague.
It's timeless, though. Yeah, just let it roll over.
Shakespeare was made by aliens in the sky. Don't try and put it towards any people on Earth. What are you doing?
It's a straight Harold Bloom quote.
The poem's explicit dedication to Southampton and the marked similarities between the descriptions of Adonis make this one of the least resistible, least contentious equations in Elizabethan literature.
Yeah, so, you mentioned that line just about, but you just says, but acknowledging a link that the Orthodox commentators do acknowledge a link between Adonis and the young Earl of Southampton.
So even Stratfordians who have no idea why Stratford would be hanging out. Stratfordians who have no idea why Stratford would be hanging out with Rossley, like even they're like, yeah, like Adonis is Rossley, but like that's one of the few in Shakespeare that we're allowed to. Yes.
Yeah.
You can.
But then we start asking them why, and they're like, "What?
I can't hear you."
Yeah. Have you actually read Venus Adonis?
Well, not in a while, but it's not the point.
Yeah.
The poem's explicit dedication. A few have taken the logical next step. If Adonis alludes to Southampton, then Venus, who is chasing after Adonis, must surely allude to Elizabeth Vere, because Elizabeth Vere and Henry Rossley were supposed to get married from 1590 all the way up to 1593. They're engaged, which engaged for 3 years and still not married. One party has cold feet. I'm just gonna say. But yeah, they were supposed to get married, and so. You Oxfordians out there, love spotting Henry Rossley because he's so close with Oxford, and that's why he's one of the main characters in that movie Anonymous, and that's why W.H. with the sonnet dedication, that's really just an inversion of Henry Rossley's initials, but so wait a second, that's who he marries then, right?
What year does DeVere, you just referenced it earlier, what's the year that DeVere knocks up that Maiden in Waiting or whatever?
82?
Okay, so
83?
It's almost a decade prior to...
Yeah.
But it's, just on the onset of, I guess, of them to be in...
But so it's like, okay, if it's Elizabeth Vere who's chasing after Henry Rossley, then Elizabeth Vere and Henry Rossley get married and live happily ever after in Oxford Shakespeare, the end. But that's not what happened. Elizabeth Vere and Henry Rossley do not get married because Henry Rossley wants to not marry her like the plague. He is pushing this wedding off farther and farther, and he's raising the price of the dowry and stuff, and then at some point he has to pay money to Oxford to break off the marriage. He pays a lot of money. He pays £5,000 or something. It's maybe it's even 10,000. It's crazy amount of money. It's just please take them. I don't want to marry her.
What do the Oxfordians have to say about this?
I've never heard about this. I had to quit being 100% Oxfordian to find this information out. And it's an interesting point, right? If Oxford is supposed to be writing this poem for Henry Rossley, why would he be writing a poem about a woman trying to get with a dude that and then giving it to him when he's not wanting to get with her? And the poem's even sort of about that Adonis is kind of running away from Venus a little bit.
He's kind of doing that Drake, meme where he's
and so it's why would Oxford? So I don't. All right, let's go further. Let's see if Buckridge can make heads or tails of this. Okay.
Yeah. So Oxford's eldest daughter.
Yes, Oxford's eldest daughter, to whom Southampton was engaged from about 1590. With increasing reluctance, it would appear, from his determination to extract himself from the engagement, despite an enormous financial penalty. The Ovidian story of an attractive and physically active young man who is vigorously pursued by a somewhat predatory woman whose amorous interest in him he does not reciprocate and whom he finally rejects, obviously lent itself to a satirical rendering of Southampton's dilemma at the time of its resolution. So, why would... If Oxford did that, that's like the meanest thing you could do to your daughter. Like, write a poem making fun of her not getting her engagement husband, and then like dedicate it to her engagement husband. Like, if you Oxfordians believe that he wrote this, like, explain why that's not psychopathic. Like, that's crazy, right? Like you've got a daughter. Like, I know she's not of marriage age, but when she goes to get married, if she's like engaged to a guy for 3 years and he keeps pushing off the marriage, then finally pays you money so that he doesn't have to get married to her, would you then write a poem about her not being able to get that guy?
It's like definitely assault in the wound. For what rational reason? I don't know.
By the way, this is the same daughter that does a few years later marry William Stanley, who is one of our Shakespeare candidates, the Earl of Derby, who we were mentioning several times as being connected to Marston, which Patrick Buckridge has an essay about. And so maybe there's something to that as well. And like that was part of his other reading of the anti-Oxford reading, is that like maybe some of this stuff coming out of Marston is against Oxford because it's coming from a Stanley point of view. That said, let me see. The match between the two situations not perfect. So the situation between the actual poem and Elizabeth DeVere in Southampton. In the poem, Venus is a queen, beautiful and somewhat older than the young man. Elizabeth DeVere is apparently none of these things. Furthermore, in the undisputed source for the basic narrative, the tale of Venus and Adonis in Book 10 of Ovid's Metamorphoses, Adonis, though beautiful, is first and foremost a great hunter, who, as Bullock put it, shows no great bashfulness, in fact none at all, in response to Venus's determined wooing. The theme of Adonis' resistance to love comes from the tale of Salmachus and Hermaphroditus in Book 4. Here in vain but glorious wooing of boy-traveler Hermaphroditus by the wood-nymph Salmachus, we find all the most memorable details of the one-sided encounter in Shakespeare's poem. His blushes, the begging and refusal of a kiss, her imprisoning embraces, her continued reluctance. And so what he's showing here is that, along with the story of Echo Narcissus, is that there's this weird like mash of several Ovidian myths, and like usually when you rework a myth, you rework that myth, and if you rework that myth, it's for a certain, like especially if it's for allegorical purposes to, allegorize or make symbols of current political, social figures. You wouldn't mix all these metaphors. You'd keep it very one-to-one. But if this is happening in a serial composition, maybe other myths are getting added to help explain the difference in situation between this historical situation and maybe the earlier historical situation that was making that play or poem being written for the first time. He says, I rehearse these agreed facts to note that a spread of 3 distinct sources is unusual. And so maybe it does point to the fact that it was serially composed, and the seriality of the process may be reflected in successive rather than simultaneous appropriation of the Ovidian sources. And that would totally make more sense. And so I'm going to skip on further. If we skip down to... If the Southampton version of the poem is the last of the series, the nature and address of the preceding version or versions is of some interest. Oxfordians, who tend to accept as a principle a single author of serial composition, are awkwardly placed on this. Some following Ogburn seem content to see the poem as an updating of a much earlier version by Oxford in which he figured as Adonis to the Queen's Venus. So people think that the one we get in 93 is a polished up version of maybe something Oxford wrote back in the 70s when he was trying to be the Queen's favorite. But who is now in 1593... Sorry.
But once again, this still doesn't match the metaphor of Venus is the one chasing Adonis, right?
Right. But who is now Venus to Southampton's Adonis? Ogburn is reluctant to say, perhaps because there are only really two possibilities, and neither of them seem very credible. So Venus is either the queen or Elizabeth Vere. So Venus is the queen, and she's exactly 40 years older than Southampton, so I don't think she's trying to woo Southampton. And if she is, why would DeVere be writing about that's weird. So no, not going to go with that one. But maybe it's that it stands for Elizabeth Vere, if only by inescapable inference from the identification of Adonis with Southampton. So Southampton's Adonis for sure, right? That's not up for grabs. It's Venus and Adonis being dedicated to Southampton in 1593. Surely Adonis is Southampton. But if Adonis is Southampton, who's the only one that could be Venus? Well, it's Elizabeth Vere. It doesn't really fit the characteristics, but it's Elizabeth Vere. So what the heck's going on? It's the only one that was chasing after him in 1593. It's got to be Elizabeth Vere. So why do we have this weird older queen figure? Well, maybe it's because it's a 1570s poem being reworked for
1590s.
Yeah. But if this 1590s one is making fun of Oxford's daughter, then it's probably not by Oxford, right? So if this one's not being written by Oxford, what's the odds that the first one was being written by Oxford?
Probably not as good either.
Yeah, and maybe the first one is written by Oxford, and these people are totally clowning Oxford by reworking his poem to make fun of him and his daughter.
Yeah.
Which, if so, touche, that's the trolliest thing ever. But maybe it's that the person that's pulling it back out to make fun of Oxford, maybe they were already making fun of Oxford in the original one. Let's see. So, leaving aside the authorship question for a moment. Sorry. I skipped way ahead.
Yeah.
The other possibility is that Venus stands for Elizabeth Vere. But this is virtually impossible if the author is Oxford, since it would mean he had not only written but seen published a poem that would most naturally be read at the time of publication, as exposing and ridiculing his own daughter's unreciprocated lust for a well-known young aristocrat. So, yeah. Oxford may have been a psychopath, but he's not that much of a psychopath. What this has to mean, surely, is that DeVere could not have written the 1593 Southampton version of Venus and Adonis. The standard Oxfordian hypothesis for an earlier version reflecting the Queen's supposed seduction should probably then also fall by the wayside, since it would entail a highly improbable takeover by a reviser hostile to the dignity of Oxford's own family. So, let's forget about Oxford, whoever it is, for a while. Let's go back to who would be the earlier Adonis? If this was being written earlier, it's not Southampton. Who is it? Well, here we go, folks. One likely candidate, once disparaging Oxfordian spectacles, and by the way, once you get rid of just total Oxfordian tunnel vision, you might start to see a whole lot of Philip Sidney. So once the disparaging Oxfordian spectacles are off, Sir Philip Sidney. There are several Adonis allusions in Astrophil, the small volume of elegies Spenser compiled after Sidney's death, and there's a long reproach to death here in the verses Spenser attributes to the Countess of Pembroke, which parallels Venus's reproach to death in Venus and Adonis. Richard Lester, in this latest issue of Elizabethan Review, proposes a different link with Philip Sidney. Writing from Oxfordian premises, he argues that Venus and Adonis, though composed much earlier, was published when it was a kind of response or answer to Sidney's Arcadia, which was published in 1590 and written a decade earlier. But it's a little difficult to see what the two have to do with each other, because one's a giant novel and one's just a sort of epic poem. Which, let me see, might be more naturally explained as a gesture of common purpose between Sidney and the close friend and fellow poet with whom in the early 1580s he shared an ambition to refine and enrich the language of English poetry. Both works, in very different ways, can be seen as contributions to such a project. You wanna highlight that line real quick? What's the project? the ambition to refine and enrich the language of English poetry in the 1580s between Sidney and his good friend and fellow poet. Brady, who would be Sidney's good friend and fellow poet in the 1580s?
None other than Edward Dyer.
Dun 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 dun!
John D. Yeah, John D. Financier, diplomat extraordinaire with William of Orange, and navigation, sort of entrepreneur and all this stuff too. Yeah, these guys.
Yeah,
a lot of fingers and a lot of pies here.
Yeah, the heir of Philip Sidney, who literally was willed Philip Sidney's books and writings and stuff when he died. So, can a case be made for Dyer as the author and reviser for Venus and Adonis? If so, it would be a lot easier to see Sidney as maybe the original Adonis on the basis of allusions and analogies. So can that case be made? It would surprise most people to know that he had a more straightforwardly documentary claim to Venus and Adonis than any other candidate than William Shakespeare. There you go. Shout out to Alden Brooks. Dyer has a claim that rests on Gabriel Harvey's cryptically framed quotation of the poem's two-line epigraph from Ovid's Amores, lines not known to be used elsewhere in Elizabethan literature, and a marginal annotation to his copy of Spate's Chaucer. So there we go, back to Chaucer. Harvey's annotation reads, Villa miretur vulgus mie fravis Apollo, pacula castalia plena ministret aqua, quoth Sir Edward Dyer between jest and earnest. Not conclusive evidence, certainly, but perhaps sufficient to justify adopting Dyer's authorship of Venus and Adonis is at least a working hypothesis. So, once again, similarly to what he was saying about Hatton earlier with Malvolio, we have somebody in their journal saying that, this was so-and-so's motto, and that motto can be seen in a work of Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing Dyer's motto in Venus and Adonis, so it's like, maybe that doesn't prove that he's writing it, but we should at least open the questioning to it now. So he says, Alden Brooks says that, once again, this is an essay by Patrick Buckridge, but Alden Brooks, an older scholar who thought that Edward Dyer was Shakespeare, speculated that Sidney was the original Shakespearean Adonis in the limited sense that Venus's lament for the slain youth had its origin in Dyer's elegy for Sidney. That's interesting. Which, wasn't that exactly what I was saying about the sonnets? Which, I was saying that about the sonnets before I ever, fully looked into this essay. There's something to that, and
that you think, especially the fair youth poems,
right,
could be written from Dyer to Sidney.
Dyer to Sidney, before 40 winters will besiege thy brow. Edward Dyer was exactly 40 when the year Philip Sidney got married and was trying to have kids. So Dyer writing to Sidney, that's becoming a congruent theme. And by the way, the guy that turned us on to Sidney was John Stotzenberg, and he spots Sidney because he spots Dyer. And so, you spot the one, you can spot the other.
And you already had said yourself, oh man, this is so hard to try to parse out the difference between the two, and then you stumble upon the serial composition explanation for it all too. That makes a lot of sense.
And so, doesn't mean we're exactly right, but maybe we're on to something.
And who are the only two dudes taking John D, chemistry, astrology, tutoring lessons? I didn't see Edward DeVere in any of that episode, right? So
No, we did the Control F thing, right? We did the Control F thing. We're like, where's DeVere? Help, DeVere, where are you? Like a kid at a mall, my parent leaves him. DeVere! That made no sense. Alright.
If we take the Oxfordian narrative, then Edward DeVere would get on the mall, intercom, and be like, better find your way home, kid. I'm leaving with the car in about 1 hour. If you can find the parking lot you came in, you can come home. That's how he's treating his daughter.
Yeah, if you decode the 4 T's in the store logo,
oh my God,
you might find me at parking lot 17.
Oh my God, thank you.
All jokes aside, let me see. So his reasons for suspecting that Elizabeth's dealings with Dyer might, at some stage, perhaps on one awkward occasion, have resembled those of an amorous Venus with a reluctant Adonis, or at least as cogent as those for any suspecting dealings with Elizabeth and Oxford. So, maybe there's a lot of Philip Sidney stuff going on with the Venus and Adonis, but that may also already be a second version, because maybe the first version is already talking about Dyer and Queen Elizabeth, because Dyer was supposed to be very briefly a favorite of hers in the 60s. I didn't know that. Yeah. And so, there's a letter...
just swinging all which ways, I guess.
Dude, so... this guy Talbot has a letter that he writes, and Oxfordians will quote this letter because in other parts of the letter it talks about how much the Queen's into Oxford. But there's a part of the letter that says, "The Queen goeth almost every day to see how he doth, Edward Dyer. Now there is devices chiefly of Leicester, as I suppose, and not without Burleigh's knowledge." So there you go, Leicester and Burleigh, a.k.a. Cecil, using guys like Sidney and Dyer to make the Queen want to do stuff. "How to make Edward Dyer as great as ever was Christopher Hatton. For now in this time of Hatton's sickness the time is convenient. It is brought thus to pass. Dyer lately was sick with a consumption, and great danger, and as your lordship knoweth, he had been in displeasure these 2 years. It was made the Queen believe that his sickness came because of the continuance of her displeasure towards him, that unless she forgave him, he was not like to recover. And hereupon her Majesty hath forgiven him, and sent unto him a very comfortable message. Now he is recovered again, and this is the beginning of this device. These things I learned from such young fellows as myself." So it's difficult to know which of the half-dozen actors we learn most about, but our focus is on Dyer for the moment. And what this letter tells us is that 2 years after incurring the Queen's displeasure, he was still remembered by her with enough affection to be restored to her favor on the basis of a transparently flattering lie. So, yeah, he had been like almost, not quite banished from court, but he had been this favorite of hers that could get toys and goodies and do what he wanted, and then he went to just being another scrub peon that had to go be a secretary for one of these hotshot earls or something. So I'm going to skip a little farther. And so exactly what he did to make Elizabeth angry, we don't know, but the point being that he was able to get back in her good graces just by making her worry that he was going to die. So clearly she cared about him. If we skip down a little farther, it says that it's worth noting that Hatton's biographer, also named Brooks, Eric Brooks, and at least one other scholar, Kenneth Thorpe Rowe, have argued that an 86-line poem called Amorous, which is attributed to Dyer and praised by Gabriel Harvey, in which two friends are smitten with love for the same woman, is based precisely on the relationships and stratagems described in this Talbot letter. So, I'm sick and I'm gonna die.
Get better until you forgive me. Or
yeah, like both Hatton and Dyer are doing that, and in this poem, we have Amaryllis as the queen, Corydon, who we've said already in several videos, Corydon or Corydons, that's Dyer. You see the name Corydon, there's no other reading other than Dyer. Like, that's Dyer. And who's the other one? Caramel or Charamel. That's Hatton. There can be no doubt that this poem does treat real events and real people, and the poet says so in the penultimate couplet. And so ultimately, if you're wondering, like, why does some guy that's actually a university professor buy into the Shakespeare authorship question, you can tell that Patrick Buckridge wants to connect poetry and plays to real historical people, places, and events. And clearly, for whatever reason, we're arbitrarily allowed to do that in some cases. Like, when it's undeniable that, Edward Dyer wrote that poem, like, sure, that's Edward Dyer, and it's referring to real people, but then all of a sudden, like, if we get another one that doesn't have Edward Dyer's name on it or has somebody else's name on it that's doing the exact same thing, like Nicholas Breton writing about Corydon and Phyllis and saying, I am Corydon. No, that's just Nicholas Breton writing about pastorals and has nothing to do with people. It's all just Greek fancy folly nonsense. And it's like, wait, what? No, we just did this whole thing with Dyer, said that these are real people, and we pinpointed them. But as soon as someone like Nicholas Breton, like, what is it? We don't. And so in our earlier video, our Group Theories wins video, We went into England's Helicon and showed you. Yeah. Nicholas Breton is writing about Phyllis and Cordon. He says, I'm Cordon. That's Edward Dyer. So, yeah, maybe that's why Buckridge is totally into the Shakespeare authorship question. And so Dyer says, well, I wot what here is meant, though a tale it seem. Shadows have their bodies by, and so of this esteem. Dyer's biographer Sargent believed that the triangle wasn't with Hatton and Elizabeth, but consisted of, here we go again, but this one's a weird one, Dyer, Philip Sidney, and Mary Sidney. That, yeah, Amyntas and Amaryllis, like Amaryllis may just be Mary, you know, Mary's name is in that name, Amaryllis, so there may be something to that. But that's kind of weird and gross, so let's not go there for now. Alden Brooks follows Sargent, but confuses the issue. Rowe makes a detailed and powerful case for Hatton and Elizabeth as Caramel and Amaryllis. Alden Brooks follows Sargent, but confuses the issue by asserting that Dyer's Amaryllis is lost, and the extant poem of that name is a scurrilous caricature by another poet altogether, probably John Lilly. Which that's a whole nother bag of worms. But real quickly, like, if the character's name is Caramel and Amaryllis, I totally see that Amaryllis could be Mary Sidney because it's got the name Mary in it. Also, I've seen people say that Amyntas and Amaryllis is Ferdinando Stanley and his wife, but maybe perhaps Amyntas is whoever is Mary Sidney's husband, Henry Herbert. But maybe more likely, since her husband's a guy that's 25 years older than her, it's her lover. So who would be her lover at that time? It could be Robert Devereux. He's a player in this. It could be Walter Raleigh. He's a player in this.
Is Bacon old enough to be...
Bacon. It could be Bacon. So, like, guys, let's dig into these Edmund Spenser nicknames once again. And so this one, though, not Amyntas, but this one is Caramel and Amaryllis that are fighting over that Cordon is going after. And so maybe Edward Dyer is fighting with Raleigh over Mary Sidney. It's all interesting. That said, we're not worried about that Amaryllis poem. We're worried about Venus and Adonis. So let's skip a little farther. So one problem with trying to say that the Queen is Venus is that, like, you probably wouldn't want to publish this, like, if that's who Venus really is.
Laundry of her not being able to get the man.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why when it is published in 1593, even though Elizabeth's still alive, clearly it's not about the Queen. That's why it's probably Elizabeth Vere and not Queen Elizabeth. So how would Dyer, or why would Dyer have written this? Like, how could he have written it? Well, it was probably a private letter. It's probably not him, like, I'm going to write this and pass it along in manuscript to everybody. It's like, I'm writing this for one person only, so it's like, you know, almost a love letter, but not a literal love letter, but, like, this is for your eyes only. You know, FYEO. Let me skip further. So, a socially and ethical plausible conjecture about this Venus and Adonis needs to incorporate culturally credible propositions about what the situation was to which the poem was alluding, and about why and for whose benefit the allusion was being made. Such propositions, culturally credible ones, do seem to me to arise from the situation at the court in 1572-73, broadly the time frame to which the Talbot letter refers. In October of 72, Dyer wrote an extraordinary letter to Hatton in which he enlarged tactfully, acutely, and candidly upon an early response he had made in person to Hatton's request for an advance on the matter how to best counter the Queen's evident attraction to the Earl of Oxford. So already we have this sort of triangle between Hatton, Dyer, and Oxford, that Hatton and Dyer are teaming up to try and get the Queen away from the Earl of Oxford. The letter is too long to quote in full. Suffice to say that it shows considerable hostility towards Oxford on Hatton's behalf, but it advises Hatton sympathetically but firmly against any attempt to have it out with the Queen. The Queen will mislike such a course. This is my reason. She will imagine that you go about to imprison her fancy and to wrap her grace with your disposition. Hatton's best course of action, Dyer assures him, is to use your suit towards your majesty in words, behavior, and deed to acknowledge your duty, declaring the reverence with your heart you bear, never seeming deeply to condemn her frailties, but rather joyfully to commend such things as should be in her, as if they were in her indeed, hating my lord of Oxford. So, like, almost act as if she already hated Oxford. Just kind of make that the fun, cool thing to do. Hate on Oxford.
Like, yeah, you know Oxford's such a dork.
Like, why would you even think that, Elizabeth?
He's such a woman killer.
Oxford, that psychopath.
He's such a maiden impregnator. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of words. So one problem might be solved by seeing Hatton as the Adonis is the emblematic role of the boar in the poem. So who's the boar in the poem? Is the boar the hero? No, the boar is the one that's going to kill Adonis. Spoiler alert, if you have not read the poem, the boar kills Adonis. But Oxfordians have noted, as well that they might, the boar is the DeVere family crest. But once again, if the boar is the family crest, like, why would Oxford write the boar into it if it represents the villain? You know?
Yeah, how does that make that doesn't even make any more sense with the narrative of him writing in relation to his daughter either, you know? It further just confounds, like
Yeah. And like once again doesn't exactly. And other people have pointed out that the boar is also maybe related to bacon as well, you know, bacon, hog, ham, but that said, like, the boar is not a good thing. You don't want to be related to the boar with Venus and Adonis. It's surely difficult to interpret this fact otherwise than as an argument against Oxford's authorship and against identifying Adonis with Oxford in an early version of the poem. If, on the other hand, Adonis stood for Christopher Hatton, then the boar's deadly hostility to Adonis can be read as a straightforward figure for Oxford's known and reciprocated hostility to Hatton. Indeed, one of Hatton's letters to the Queen from this period strongly supports such a reading. Written during the same period of ill health to which the Talbot letter refers, the letter expresses Hatton's gratitude for a favor the Queen has sent him, a branch of the sweetest bush. It is a gracious favor most dear and welcome unto me. Reserve it to the sheep. He hath no tooth to bite, where the boar's tusk, or tush, may both raise and tear. The sexual innuendos of bush and tooth and tush and tusk are intriguing, but even without them, there can be no doubt that in the letter the sheep is Hatton and the boar is Oxford. The latter equation clearly supports the same identification of Oxford with the boar in the poem, and may even suggest why the author chose as his narrative vehicle an Ovidian tale with a boar in it. So, like, as much as Oxford is Arthur Golding's nephew, and Arthur Golding is the translator of Ovid, like, he's not the only one reading Ovid, and at some point...
Sidney's defense again.
Like, Ovid and Aesop and any of these people that have all these little mini tales... that are all these kind of little mini stories.
Fables.
Yeah, fables. Like, why pick one over the other to turn into the most epic, poem in the language? Like, for all intents and purposes, Venus and Adonis is one of the few giant epic poems from that time that we, like, totally love and hold on to. And it's like, why was that the Ovid tale? Why not another one? Why not another one? And at least shout out to Oxfordians. They're like, well... this is all about love and falling in love, and there's references to boars, and there's references maybe to, like, Adonis and Queen Elizabeth. Maybe that's related to our guy, and maybe that has something to do with it. And it's like, okay, at least they're trying to relate it back, and they're saying, well, his uncle is the one that wrote the Ovid translations, and so maybe that's why he would be picking Ovid over other writers. All that makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is why he's picking the one that's, like, turning his family crest into the symbol for the villain, and why he would be writing the one that's making fun of a woman being spurned by her lover and be writing it to the guy that dumped his daughter. Like, none of that makes any sense. Nope. None of it makes any sense. So let's see. We're almost done here, folks. So we do not find, at least in the published poem, a sheep. But the sheep was the Queen's private nickname for Hatton, not his heraldic device. Presumably... it's a playful alternative to mutton, which is maybe a pun on Hatton. Hatton, Hotten, mutton, Hatton, Hotten, mutton, something like that. I don't know.
Especially if you're like a cute little sheep or something like he's
right.
been depicted,
Yeah, or it's got this also Christ lamb figure as well, Christopher Hatton, Christ. So there's something there. In the poem, and there, as it happens, there's another homonym or pun on Hatton. So it's not just Hatton Mutton, but if you're British, you don't always pronounce H's.
Hatton.
So Hatton. Try and say Adonis in one of these really Cockney accents.
Yeah.
Adonis. I apologize once again to my British viewers. If we have any British viewers, I'm so sorry.
The fifth Beatle over here.
Pete Best, ladies and gentlemen, in the flesh. One would not want to stake an argument on the resemblance of Hatton to Addon, but it might be just another reason to suggest this Ovidian tale over another Ovidian tale to turn into a poem, because it's like, all right, I'm writing it for this guy Hatton. It's got this story where it's got the boar is the villain and the main character's name is Addon or Adonis, and I'm writing a tale about watch out for this guy with a family character as a boar. It fits. It's like, all right, yeah, this one works. Let me write about it.
And the queen.
The queen being Venus. Yeah.
Too.
And so all of it makes sense. But for whose eyes and what reason? If Edward Dyer wrote it with the Queen and Hatton as the lovers and the Earl of Oxford as the boar, who was he writing this for? Well, it can only have been done as a witty warning to Hatton himself. A warning in the same vein as his letter, but put in a different mode. And me and Brady were talking about this earlier, that in our 2 videos ago, our Epic John Dee podcast, which if you've not watched that, take the time to piecemeal that out if you can. It's a 4+ hour podcast, but it's filled with information and it ties so much into Sidney Dyer. We talk about DeVere, we talk about Marlowe, we talk about all sorts of Shakespeare plays. Check out that podcast. But in that, we say that Dyer's almost like the right-hand man or the consigliere or the mouthpiece of Dee and Leicester. And so if Dyer's doing this, it might be people like John Dee and Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, that are like, Dyer, go write this poem for Hatton to let him know, don't do this, he'll get himself killed. And he also, maybe if Leicester and Dee are telling him to do that, or Dyer's doing it, there may be other plays behind it. It may not just be warning Hatton not to do it. It may be like, dude, don't do this, you're going to screw up our plans for blah, 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 blah. Which may include Oxford himself. I know that's crazy. But the message and the substance of the warning is clear, whether the letter or this poem. Don't pit yourself against Oxford. The Queen is infatuated with him, and you will lose. The poem, however, carries the warning not in the form of positive strategic advice about do this or don't do this, but it's a cautionary tale. This is what happened to a guy that, pitted himself against the boar for the love of Venus, who was, going way too hard after him, and he should have just told her, don't go after me, let the boar have you. I don't want you, because, going after you is going to get me killed. Instead of saying that, he didn't, and he got himself killed. And so that's probably what's happening in this poem. If Hatton indulges in the same sort of bravado, he's likely to end up dead in the same condition, or at least metaphorically, as Adonis did. And the Queen, like Venus, will be unhappy forever. So, it is possible, finally, that there is a reason why it occurred with the author of the Southampton version, published in the 1593. To revive and refurbish a poem he had first written for Christopher Hatton 20 years before. But perhaps genuinely then the first heir of his invention? Sonnet shout out. In November 1591, Hatton died, and within the next 2 months as many as 5 eulogies were published. Perhaps this gave Dyer a chance to offer his own cryptic memorial to an old friend, while at the same time freeing him to publish it in print and to make some money, knowing that the one person who understood its original meaning, perhaps the only person who had read the earliest version, could not be embarrassed by it. I want to go one step further than Buckridge is doing here. It's like, alright, if the first version of the poem is like, hey, watch out for Oxford, he's a psychopathic killer, and then you hear that one of your really close family friend members, this young guy that's about to come up, who's been like trying desperately to get out of a marriage with this psychopath's daughter, like finally gets out of it. You might write this poem as a little congratulatory thing, you know, because that very poem was originally used to say, watch out for the psychopath. It's like, well, heads up, you did good, because this is what would have happened to you. And so, like, it's still functioning as the same sort of message. Watch out for the boar.
Yeah.
Watch out for Oxford. So, a totally different take from an Oxfordian take. But at the same time, as much as he's not Oxfordian, Patrick Buckridge, Oxford and reading Oxford's biography is still incredibly important to the reading of Shakespeare.
Yes.
And so that's why me and Brady are totally group theorists. That, like, that's why there may be competing sonnets. There may be competing poems. This may explain some of these other people that are writing things similar to Venus and Adonis, like Hero and Leander or something like that. It may be the other person that's not Dyer. That may be DeVere or Bacon or Sidney writing their version. So that's the Patrick Buckridge essay. I'm a huge fan of this essay because maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. I don't know if I 100% go with it or not. I'm still pretty compelled by a lot of the Oxfordian argument.
I think, but he kind of is showing you, like, I don't know, reading the way the text says about, you know, talking about the sheep biter, you know, and about, like, well, that doesn't make sense.
We have to be more specific by it. Yeah.
A very careful reading. Like I was not trying to say, like, oh, you didn't read hard enough, because, like I said, clearly these metaphors are in here. I don't know, because, obviously I don't think if you and I are reading any of this stuff, we're not going to be like, you know, the sheep thing, that must have been Christopher Hatton, because of it. It's like, I don't know how people are able to, like, know that that's what Elizabeth was calling this one dude, or whatever, right? And so there is so much intertextuality and so much cross-examination you have to do. I don't know, God forbid if you didn't have computers and the internet to just quickly, like, blah, blah, blah,
that's why,
wow, yeah.
Hats off. I don't have my hat today, which, by the way,
hats on.
Hat on. I'm doing the video of hat on with my hat off today. There's a little play on words there, and
no. There's some
shout out to Bastion Conrad. This is Chance in full.
There you go. Yeah.
No ball cap boy today.
I'll zoom it in on post edit.
I forgot it in my backpack. I would be wearing it otherwise. If you have questions or comments about this, or better yet, if you have rebuttals to this, please sound them off in the comments. You know, most preferably, we'd be most interested in why Buckridge is wrong. But furthermore, if you just have good evidence for why you think Oxford wrote Venus and Adonis, throw it in there. If there's some other point that Buckridge missed that doesn't point towards Dyer, but does point towards Oxford.
The tragic hero, we forgot that line.
Yeah, if there's another reading of it, or like if there's just some other, your number 17 and the triple towels and all that. If you got it in there, show it to me. That said, if it's just triple towels and 17, that's could be just another pointing to D and the Rosicrucians, including Dyer, Sidney, and Bacon, and all the other folks. So if there's a good reason why Patrick Buckridge isn't making the right reading, let us know. But like for instance, earlier in this, Patrick Buckridge is talking about Malvolio as Oxford. Well, in a comment discussion that I've been having with Patrick Tilton, the Oxfordian, we've been going back and forth, and he points to, well, no, I think Oxford's writing this play because Andrew Aguecheek, who's totally a dunce in the play, that's making fun of Philip Sidney. And so who else would want to make more fun of Philip Sidney than Oxford? But I don't know that goes against Malvolio. That's just for Andrew Aguecheek. That's not for against Malvolio. And I guess you would just still say it's Hatton, but what do you have to say about sheep biter versus sheep? What do you have to say about the fortunate unhappy being the signee versus the addressee? And then furthermore, just about Venus and Adonis beyond Twelfth Night, like, come on. So check out Patrick Buckridge if you haven't. Academia.edu, archive.org, or JSTOR should have plenty of Patrick Buckridge for you. He doesn't only do Shakespeare, Elizabethan stuff. He does a lot of Marston stuff for sure. But he also does on canonicity and curriculum stuff about English, British, American, and Australian literature.
And he also had a very interesting essay about just collecting and gifting books in general, I believe.
Yeah,
just
on reading, on the process of reading.
Personal books in your own personal libraries and how important that sort of activity was. Or
yeah,
is.
And so he's in that Sydney and readerly mind space, that closet drama Samuel Daniel mind space. Which is definitely where I'm coming from.
Like I said, Mount Rushmore of Apocalypse, Historia, Shakespeare, authorship, sort of face. Stoutenberg and Buckridge now, right?
And one that's not an authorship questioner, but I just want to throw him in as Charles Lamb. At some point, I want to do a quick little video. Yeah, there you go, Lamb to Hatton, shout out. Charles Lamb's an essayist and poet that's buddies with all the Romantic poets in the early 1800s, but he's maybe the first guy to put these Elizabethans and specifically Shakespeare on this giant pedestal, and he's just obsessed with them. But he more than anybody is like, do not try and put these on stage. These are not meant to be acted. This is theater. This is meant to be read. And it's like, I love theater, and shout out to my best friend Ian, and check out his Broadway Theater YouTube channel. But as much as theater is great, there's something super powerful about reading Shakespeare and similar playwrights as almost like a novel. You can just imagine so much more tonally, and the amount of multiplicity can sit and hover in your head so much more than it being reduced to a singular delivery as you see on stage.
Plus, like what we said before, the thing that's sort of important about Shakespeare is that it gets printed in its big, sort of complete form, right?
Right.
And it is like,
if this wasn't put into the folio and bound to the folio, we wouldn't care. And to that end, like, who are like the most famous playwrights from that time? It's like Shakespeare and Ben Jonson. And who are the ones that get the folio printings? Shakespeare and Ben Jonson. It's like, yeah, it's because we get to keep reading their plays because their stuff was printed. So that said, folks, we won't go any further. Coming up on an hour and a half here, maybe 2 hours here. Meant to make this a little quicker, but we wanted to be thorough with this essay. Didn't want to skip through anything because this is, highly controversial for you Oxfordians. This is very much contentious even. I would like to hear some responses in the comments. Let us know if you think that there's some compelling readings to Edward Dyer as, being the original writer of the Venus and Adonis sonnets. We've been talking about Dyer for a while here, and we've been also poking holes at Oxford for a while here. That said, also expect some future videos on some cool stuff. We plan to do maybe a live reading of The
Tempest.
Maybe The Tempest. There's maybe some other ones that we wanted to maybe do some live readings of. Troilus.
And just wondering, y'all stick around, and if Macbeth. It has already happened in our YouTube head, but stick around, because I think, us going through just like what Buckridge is doing in Twelfth Night and Venus and Adonis, let's find some of these contentious quotes, let's find some of these metaphor quotes that people like to pick out, let's read it line by line, and let's surprise some of this, I'd hate to say, not, we're only going to apply our group theory sort of mentality to it, but like at this point, like I think we've well proven that that collaboration and sort of like back and forth.
It's not out of the question at the very least.
And so just going through and like doing our analysis of this kind of stuff and be like, did this line really say what it meant?
Right. And there's so much out there for how to spot Oxford by Oxfordians. There's so much out there for how to spot Bacon and his buddies by the Baconians, but they're not looking at each other's stuff. And there's other folks. Shout out Jim Fest with the Pembroke stuff. Yeah. And at least he's looking beyond just Mary. He's looking at Philip and other folks. But at some point, like, have this whole collection and see if you can look at them and see if some don't cross out or see if they all can fit together. And that's been helping me with some of this Thomas Watson stuff that I mentioned earlier that hopefully we do have a video coming out on soon. Because if you are only trying to spot Oxford and Thomas Watson, you're not going to be able to make heads or tails of some of these poems. But if you're trying to spot Oxford as the author of Thomas Watson with other people's names and symbols and codes as well, then you will be able to make heads or tails of some of these poems. And so, like, once again, it's not enough to just spot one person. You spot Sidney, you spot Dyer. You spot Dyer, you spot Sidney. You spot DeVere, you spot Sidney. You spot Sidney, you spot DeVere. You spot Stanley, you spot Oxford. Like, there's starting to be connections here, and we haven't totally codified it or mapped it out in full. It's all kind of happening in real time, but hope to do that more and more and more and more, and maybe even do it on a live stream with one or more of these texts. And yeah, maybe we won't get through a whole text, maybe not even a whole act, maybe just a scene, but that's enough to start to break down and show how we're doing our close readings. And maybe you guys, if we do it with a live stream, you can tell us how you can make close readings as well and be an awesome giant group discussion. So stay tuned for that. Maybe we can do that for 200 subscribers. That's coming in hot here.
Yeah, it is.
Which, yeah, like, subscribe if you haven't before. Please, we could really use it. Trying to get more and more of our info out through the algorithm to distribute it to get people interested in this conversation. There's a lot of great stuff happening on YouTube, but it is a little stiffer, it is a little older, and it's maybe not as welcoming to the casual layperson as maybe me and Brady's Shucks Dad Jeans approach is, our millennial version at least. So yeah, please like, subscribe, share, help get us out there. If you are so inclined, please check out our Patreon page. We have a burgeoning Patreon page to hope to build a deeper, more tight-knit community, which if you check out our comments, we totally have, and that's not on us, that's on you guys. You guys have done an awesome job sticking around, commenting, keeping the discussion going. Just give a few names and a few shout-outs. Anderson, thanks for coming back and kicking in with some awesome notes after your musical hiatus. Daniel Cowan, thank you so much for those unbelievably awesome comments. Those are like as valuable as our, videos themselves, honestly. And like, I think I told that to Strip Matter, and my reply to him, like, if you don't want to watch our videos, at least stick around and read our comments, because there's some good gold happening here. Lacrities, I've seen you popping in from time to time. Apollo Cobain, Roughneck, one of my favorites that I always forget to mention, but like Soltron keeps coming in with the Baconian stuff. Simon Miles, Jake Roberts, that kind of stuff has been awesome. It's helped open me up to, like I said, get a wider background knowledge, to spot more symbols of people and names, to maybe see more iterations and versions of serial composition and collaboration. Shout out to Michael Reed, coming in with the Ben Jonson material, coming in with maybe still keeping open Shakespeare as a character in the scene.
Right.
Maybe not the main writer, but maybe still a writer in some way.
He sent me something about like Shakespeare, or Shakespeare being some sort of like kind of not a low life, but sort of rough and tough, sort of like in that actor scene. But yeah, very much a sort of, not to say shady character, but at the same time. Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to think of maybe a film or something version, but yeah, this almost like a Jim Thompson novel character, where it's this.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, like it's this rough guy that you can start to maybe. This sort of rougher guy that you can maybe manipulate into doing the things you want. The Master, Joaquin Phoenix's character in The Master is totally what that gives me. You familiar with that?
I haven't watched
it. It's like Philip Seymour Hoffman, one of his last movies before he passed. But like, yeah, Philip Seymour Hoffman plays a character that's loosely based on L. Ron Hubbard, and
that's right.
Joaquin Phoenix is this, just kind of slightly sociopathic, psychopathic ex-vet from World War II that's, maybe not all there because of World War II, and maybe wasn't all there even before World War II, but he's this super aggressive personality that the L. Ron Hubbard character, I think his name is Dodd in the movie, Dodd wants to keep having him around to almost like observe, experiment, and then like manipulate into doing things. And it's almost like, yeah, what Mr. Abzu is kind of saying about the Shakespeare character, that he's this maybe not quite savant, maybe not quite autistic.
Oh no, you sent me something else about he was like caught, stealing stuff or doing like low life criminal activity stuff. Yeah, but back to the front mind stuff, is that he's still an actor, that someone's still like that personage, and maybe not involved with actual writing and not being smart or whatever, but yeah, just his I would think of it as more of like a It's like when you're not entrapped, but what's like the thing where you've been turned. It's like, all right, yeah, you got caught being an idiot, so now we're gonna kind of use your personage for our own gain, or you're gonna flip on us, or sort of be informant for us, or that kind of type of thing, or whatever.
Extorted.
And so that's how I think that was one of these essays or one of these takes on him that I had seen. So I thought that was interesting. It was connecting with some of the small document evidence we do have.
Me and Brady are not against that idea.
No, not at all.
Whatsoever.
Not at all.
So yeah, just awesome community. Thanks for staying tuned. Thanks for keep watching. Very soon. No, I said very. Not very soon, but some point soon, we will have an edited video that will not just be us live recording. It will be, us using voiceover, putting B-roll footage, putting in pictures, putting in music.
Joe Rogan AI voices.
Yeah, like crazy special effects, talking like Peter Jackson status. We will have a Shakespeare authorship primer video coming out in the near future, which maybe a lot of you folks don't even need that primer video, but I think you'll enjoy it because it's gonna kind of cohesively tie together just the front few of the favorite list of alternate candidates, ranging from Oxford to Bacon to Mary Sidney to Marlowe to Thomas North, and maybe mention a few others as well. So stay tuned for that as well. Any other thoughts, Brady, before we tie it off here?
Not so much, I guess. Yeah, just also check the links below if you like our work. Drop us a donation on Venmo, or maybe sign up for our Patreon that we kind of have, either supporting us via coffee or beer wise. But otherwise, I think it's most apt to close out with the usual Royal Society motto of nullius in verba, because very much so, no one's word, like, let's read this stuff for ourselves, let's start making your own conclusions on that type of stuff. But, thanks for sticking around, hope you enjoyed, and we will see you all next time.